Today's daf is Masechtas Nazir Daf Chav Zayin. So we are really in the middle of the Gemara. The Gemara asked a kasha. So the Gemara here, let's take a step back to Chavav and Beis, where the Gemara says approximately 7 lines from the bottom, the second word on the line. The Gemara says, Amar lei Rav Simi bar Ashi le Rav Papa. Rav Simi bar Ashi told Rav Papa, my tamai de Rabbanan. What's pshat? And this is the Chachamim said, the Amri, that they said that ma'os should be yiplu in a dava and not a behemoth tamima, and not a nascha, and not metals, precious metals, gold and silver, and daf gamois and veloy svara, and not bundles of beams, because all these things, anything beside for money, goes to Yam Melech. Why? They were tiny that the halacha Moshe Sinai was only said by money, and pashtus because all these other things are not considered money. And the whole halacha Moshe Sinai was only said when it's money. Zakti Gemara, Elameata ma'ois v'lei oifos. L'chayra, you should say that only money, and also you should say to be ma'id oifos. If somebody is chayiv to bring shtei sarim or shtei b'nei yaina, one for chatas, one for oila, and he's mafresh them, and he dies before he specifies which one's for oila, which one's for chatas, then l'chayra should not have a din like Ma'is Stumin that it goes to Nadava, rather should have a din like Mefurashim, which is Dinam Lamisa. So Zakti Gemara, why? Because it's not money, it's Oifis. So Zakti Gemara, Chitem Achanami, maybe you're right. Maybe that's Takara Halacha, Oifis go Lamisa. So Frekti Gemara, Ibezoya, Lahadam Rav Chizda, this Rav Chizda says, Ein Hakinin Mispar Shois, Ela Ibla Kichas Ba'olim, Iba Asiyas Kain. Rav Chizda says that Kinin, you don't know which one is for a chatos and which one is for an oila. The only way to know is when the bailam buys them, or basiyas kohen, ibasiyas kohen, when a kohen's makar of them. But if the owner does not say when he purchases them which one is for chatos, which one is for oila, and he dies before the kohen is makar of them, then the kinim go for an adava, like the din of Ma'is Stumin. That's what Rav Chizda seems to be saying. So, Frekti Gemara, if you say that Oifis are not Bechlal Halacha Moshe Sinai of Yiplon Adava, Amai, then why does Rav Chizda say Yiplon Adava? Ma'is Gemirim La. L'chayra, the whole Halacha Moshe Sinai is only by money, but Ma'is l'chayra should have a din like Mefurashim. And since you don't know which one's Chatas, which one's Va'ilah, so if the Bailam dies, it should be a din that they both go Lamisa, because the Chatas that's mixed into it. And from Rav Chizda that says that it's Yiplon Adava, it's pretty clear that also oifis are included in the halacha Moshe Sinai of Ma'is Stumin, and not just money. So ibazoi, huadin nascha, and savash occurs and a bundle of beams should also be included, just like it's the oifis are included. Later of Chizda. So that was Rav Simi bar Ashi's ha'ara to Rav Papa. So Rav Papa tried to tell him back. Rav Papa tried to be matcher Rav Simi bar Ashi's kasha, and he told him Amar lei v'letamech. And according to your reasoning, that anything you mafresh for karbonis, and you're not mafarish, seeing which carbon goes, as din like Ma'is Stumin, including tziporim, birds, and maybe nascha and savar shalkairs for that reason, l'chayra, how are you going to answer this Mishnah? Or what? What does the Mishnah say? This is the Mishnah says later on, daf mem hey amid alf. The Mishnah says the following. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Hevi shalosh behemoths, a nazir that brings 3 behemoths, a keves, a kifsa, and an ayil for a shlamim, as a first kabbanis. Veloy pirish, and Zakr Shimon Gamliel, he does not specify which carbon goes for what. He just brings those 3 kabbanis, but he does not say which one's for which. The halacha is, it's as if he was mafarish for which carbon he's bringing. Why? Because each one of those behemoths could only be going for a certain carbon. Ayil could only be going for a shlamim. So therefore, harui lechatas, the kifsa, which is normally that's for chatas, tikra chatas, go for chatas. La'oila, tikra v'oila. The keves, which usually goes la'oila, keves la'oila, he should makar for oila, and the shlamim tikra shlamim. The ayol should go for shlamim, which is the normal. So frak the Gemara, frak or papa on Rav Ashi. According to you, Amai, why does Rav Shimon say that it's ki'ilu is mefarish if he just brings those three types of animals? Ha'amrit, behema laf mefurashis. You tell me when a guy brings a behema, it's not like mefurashis. So ask Rav Papa to Rav Simon Bar Ashi that you were saying that behemoths lab kumfurashis dam. That if somebody brings three behemoths which are not roy for carbon aziris, for instance, he brings three parim. The frekt of Papa on Rav Simon Bar Ashi that what's Rav Shimon says that if it does not specify which animal goes for which carbon, then you say that's a din like kumfurashim. L'chor, you're telling me that behemoths lab kumfurashis dam. That if somebody brings a karbanis, if he sets aside, let's say, three parim which are not right for carbon aziris, we say that as they're like mois stumim, they all go in a dava. So why did you say also that if he's mafish three animals, even though they are right for carbon aziris, say that it should not have a din like mufurashim unless he specifies clearly which specific animal goes for which specific carbon? So Rav Simi answered him that you can't compare oifei stumim to behemoths haruis la carbon. He told him Amalei. It's not the same. Why? Because Hasam Lagabi Oifis or Chizah says that it has a din like Stumim. Why? Because V'lokach V'asa Amar Achmana. The pasuk says in Vayikra Perik Yud Beis pasuk Ches V'lokach Shtei Soirim Oishnei B'nei Yoina Echeloi Lav Echelachatos. And also it says in Vayikra Perik Tesvav pasuk Lam and Lam and Alf. Also says Echem B'nei B'nei Yoina Esa Echelachatos says Echad Oila. And we learn out from that the shem chatos and oila goes on the birds. So ibel kichas bailim, ibasi is kohen. It can happen in one of two ways: either b'shas when the bailim makes the purchase when it's kohen, or when the kohen's makravit. That's when each bird gets its shem oila chatos. And if at the time of the kicha the bailim does not say what it is until shas hakrava, then it's not considered mefurashim by themselves. Because each one of the birds technically be either an oila or a chatas. And therefore, if the bailam dies before the kohen's makrav, the halacha is yiplun udava, like mois stumim, because each bird could be either oila or chatas. But hachanami, in the case of Rav Shimon Gamliel, it's talking about the shalosh behemoths that are ruis l'karban nazir, you can't say that it should have a din like mois stumim. Why? Because Mima Tasamret Hadim the Chatas Tikra Vayla. Could you say over here in our case that the animal that is able technically to be a oila, that same animal could be a chatas? No, only by birds you could say that the bird that's supposed that could eventually be an oila could also eventually be a chatas. Depends on what the owner chooses. But by animals, it doesn't pass such a thing because two different animals that are one's roy for oila, one's roy for a chatas. L'chera hacha nekeva, hacha zachar. By a korban chatas, you have to bring dafka nekeva, and by oila, you have to bring dafka zachar. And since each one of the animals is only roy for to be one of the karbanis, so therefore it has a din like mefurashim, like kilu is mefarish, that it should be for that carbon, and therefore you can't compare it to oifis, where the din is that it has a din like mois stumim, to behemoths, which is karbanis that are roy for naziris. And memela, you could be mechiach from the words of Chizal Gabi Oifis, and the halacha Moshe Messinai is that if you're not mefarish the chatas and taruvis, then the whole taruvis has a din that can go on the dava. It's also said legabe things that are not money, and memela we'll go back to the kasha that we had that hakam only by mois. He said halacha l'chayr you should say by savashal kairis and by nascha also. If you say once you see it's not strictly by mois, it's even by tziporim, by birds, then maybe say it by nascha and by savashal kairis also. So you back to the original kasha. So bekitzer, it's going to be shver. Then a later of chizda l'chayr it says by tziporim you say tzipul nedava. L'chayr you should say the same thing. Huadin by nascha and savashal kairis. So that's the kasha we have here. So Mechatesi Terami Ram, it said that the whole din halacha Moshe Messina Yiplun Dava is only strictly by Mois. So let's see the Gemara weiter. Now the Gemara is going to go, and the Gemara is going to shtel on this. Rav Nachman said that behemas Bailas Muam has a din like Mois Tum. So Zakti Gemara, Masav Rav Nuna asks, Mi Amrina behema Bailas Muam Kastumidama. Do you say that it's din like Mois Tumim? And it goes on the Dava. Zakti Gemara Tashma. Zakti Gemara Tashma. L'chayr we see in the Brisa. The Brisa said, Ketzad Amru. Brisa says, when do you say that Allah Moshe Messinai? Ha'ish megaleach al naziris aviv. So it's mavur later on, the Mishnah, later on Daf Lamed Amid Aleph, couple blot. It's mavur that a father that has mafresh karbonis for his own naziris, so the son could bring these karbonis for the son's naziris, for his own naziris, and the Gemara says over there that this halacha is halacha Moshe Messinai. So the Brisa says, Ketzad Amru. When did we say this halacha Moshe Messinai? Ish megaleach al naziris aviv, that he could bring karbonis that his father was mafresh b'shas the father's naziris, and he could be yotze for himself, for the son. Bizman Yehuva aviv nazirim. Him and his father were nazirim. The hifresh aviv mois l'nazirusai, and his father was mafresh money for karbanis for his own naziris, for the father's naziris, and he did not specify for which carbon the money is going to go. Umeis, and then the father dies before he gets a chance to be makar of his karbanis. The Amar. And the Ben says, after the father's death, he says, Hareini Nazir Amanashak Aleach Mois Abba. I'm going to become a Nazir, he's Mekabel Naziris, Balmanas, and he's Galeach on the money that his father was mafresh for, Karbonis for the father's own Naziris. So that's a case where the Nazir can be makar for Karbonis Naziris from money that his father was mafresh for his own Naziris. So the Brisa continues on and says that if the Ben was already a Nazir, what happens if the Ben was already a Nazir B'chayav? And then the same thing happened. The father's mafresh money for his karbonos and he dies. So in that case, the ben cannot bring these karbonos and zeros from the money that his father was mafresh, l'tzarich the father's own karbonos. And what do you do with the money? The halach with the money is like this: if the father was not mafresh with this money for which karbonos is going to, the halach is yiplun and dava, goes vaylos and dava, like the din of moisa and naziris. What happened if it was Mefareshes and he specified for which money for which karbonos this money should go to? So Chata Salach is Thomas, Behim should die, like it did in Chat Shmeis Balel. And if he was Mafresh for Oila, Lalach is Tikarev Oila, she can be Makar carbon oil Sandava. And if it was Vishlamim, Yikarvu Shlamim should go for Shlamim. So Zakr of Hamnuna is Medayik from this. Zakar Amnuna, you see from the Brisa, Mois Tumim is Yiplun Nadava. At Dafka Mois is Yiplun Nadava. But let's say the father left over Behemois. Let's say he left over Behemois that he put aside for Karbanis. Then it would not be the halacha. Why? Because you don't have the halacha Moshe Messinai said on Behemois. It's not said on Behemois, it's only said on Mois. So my love, I feel about Asmum. L'chayra is a move from the Brisa, Zakar Amnuna, that even if his mafresh shows behemoths and they're all bailas mum, and he's not mafarish which carbon it goes from, still you say it has a din like mefarashes, and they all go to misa. So it's muchach from them that even behemoth bailas mum has a din like mefarashes, and it's shver of Nachman had said before. He said, Nachman said clearly that behemoth bailas mum has a din like stuma, and it's yiplun nadava. So l'chor zakram nuno, you see from this brisa not like that is being medayik. Zakti gemara, no, don't be medayik from the brisa like this. Loi Tamima. So you're saying no, this at the Brisa it says is Yel Chamiso, no, it's only talking about a behemoth Tamima, but a Bailas Mum, you're right. We'll say exactly like Rav Nachman said, that a behemoth Bailas Mum has a din like Mois and it's Telech and Adava. So Frakti Gemara Lafidus Teretz, that it has a din for Reshes, a behemoth Tamima, so it says Avol L'chora avo bailas mum, kastuma dam, you'll say as it did like stuma. So for Gemara, Mayeri Mois. And why does the Tana say Yiplun Adav Lagabi Mois? Let him say Lema Hoisala Behema bailas mum. Let Tana say also by bailas mum Yiplun Adava. Why does the Tana say that not by money it's mashma staff Lagabi money and not Lagabi Behema even bailas mum? So Gemara Hachanami. Really the din is also by bailas mum. And this that the Tana said Mois, it also includes Bailas Mum. He really meant to include Bailas Mum. But Bailas Mum, Lamai Kadisha. Lagabe, what is a Bailas Mum Kaddish? Just L'dmei. Just that you could sell it and buy a carbon with its money. Because the animal itself, you can't be makar, it's Bailas Mum. So D'mei Hainu Mois. Dr. Gemara, this that you could sell for its value, for money, something you could only sell, its whole value is that you get money for it, that's considered mois. And Melo, when the Tana says mois, that taka includes bailas mum, because that's the definition of mois. As I zok the Gemara. Frek the Gemara nocha kasha on this that Rav Nachman said that Behema bailas mum has a din like mois tumim. Masav Rava asked the kasha. The Mishnah says increases. Daf Chav Zayin and Beis. The Mishnah says that a person that was mechuyev in a chatos, he was mafresh a behema and he dies, and his son is also mechuyev in a chatos. The halacha is the son cannot be mafresh the animal that the son cannot be makar of the animal that the father was mafresh. And so too, if a person was mafresh a behema for a chatos on a chet that he did, on a avera that he did, he can't bring that same animal that he was mafresh for a different chet. And even if he was mafresh the chatas on, let's say he was over on Isser Chelev, he can't bring it on another time, let's say in 2 months before that it was over on Isser Chelev. And the Bryce over there in Krisis Chav Zayin and Beis is mavur, the makor to these halachas is because it says on the pasuk lagabe on nasi that that's choite. It says in Vayikra Parak Dal Pasuk Chav Gimel, Oy hoida elav chatasay ashachata ba vehavias karbonoi seir izim zachar tamim. And from the word karbonoi we learn out that dafka be karbonoi hu yotzei, he's yotzei dechevasai ve'eni yotzei be karbonov. But he's not yotzei with his father's carbon that his father was mafresh for himself. And therefore the ben cannot get a kapara with the chatzos that his father was mafresh. So frakti Gemara, Yachol lo yetzei b'karbonos shel aviv. This that we learn out from the pasuk that a son cannot be yotzei with the carbon of his father. So I might say, dafka, if both are the averes, the fathers and the son, are not equal in its chamurness. For instance, shehifresh min akala chamura, that the father was mafresh behema chatos on a more kula de gavera. For instance, nida achilas chele v'dam, which does not have mises bed and only has karas or misib de shemayim, and the ben wants to bring the carbon on a more chamed gavera like chil Shabbos, which has skila. So avera that has skila is more chamer than just a karas or misib de shemayim. Or maybe the opposite, that the father was mafresh behema lechatas because he's over on a more chamed gavera, and the son wants to bring a chatas on a more kula de gavera. So maybe in that case, that's what the Mishnah is saying, the son can be yotzei with the carbon that his father was mafresh because it's two different levels of averis. One's more chamer, one's more kal. Avol yotzei b'karban shifresh shavim nakala akala. Maybe when they're both equal and the father and the son both did kula de gaveris, maybe then maybe then the son could use a father's animal that was mafresh and he died. Talmud Loimar, so the Bezok de Braisa, karbonai. It says twice karbonai. One time it says in the pasuk that we bought before, it says vehavias karbonai. And then it says another time, it says Oihida elav chatasai in pasuk chavches, vayikr dal pasuk chavches, it says so the fact that it says karbonai twice, we learn out that karbonai hu yotzei ve'eni yotzei karbonai shel aviv. So that tells you that he's yotze only with his carbon, that the son's only yotze with his carbon, that he's mafresh. And even if it's the same level of Avero that his father did, he still needs to bring his own carbon. So frekta braysa vayter yochol, I might say lo yotze b'carbon aviv b'behema shehifresh. I might say that he can't be yotze with the carbon that his father's mafresh himself. Afilu min akal al akal min chamura al chamura. So Dr. Brisa, okay, fine. So maybe I'll say you can't take a son can't be yotze with a behemoth that his father's mafresh, even if it's kal al kal or chamur al chamur, it's the same level of avera. Why? Because just like you find in anu galeach al behemoth aviv ben aziris, just like you find that a father is mafresh a behemoth for himself in aziris, and he dies, the son cannot bring it for his own aziris. So Ibn will say also by chatas, the son cannot be yotze nechivasa with this behemoth from his father. Aval, but maybe I'll say yotze b'mois shehifreshavim. Maybe the son could be yotze his yidei choivas carbon with money that his father was mafresh for a carbon chasm for himself. Maybe that does work. Maybe the money, if it's just money that he was mafresh, that would be good. Afilu min achamur l'kala min akal achmur. Even if it's different level of avers, but being that it's just the money, not the animal itself, that could work. Why? Because on that same note, you find you do find the Legam Nazirus that a Nazir could bring karbanis from money that his father was mafresh for the father's own karbanis, and then the father dies, and the son says Harini Nazar Manashe Galech Hamois Abba. You see that works. Bisman Shein Stumim, Bisman Shein Farashin. You see it works if the father is not mafarish what the money should go for. If you go for a chatas or a oila, in that case you see that the son could bring it for his own naziris. So it was here also, maybe by when the son's bringing a carbon chatas, if it's from money that his father was mafarish for his own carbon chatas, maybe that will work, just like you say by naziris it works. Zakti Gemara Talmud Loimar. It says a third time in the parasha of Yikar Perik Dal Pasuk Lamed Beis, and Yeves Keves Yavi Karbonai Lechatos. So from the word Karbonai, the fact that it says a third time Karbonai, you learn out that Karbonai Yu Yotzi Ve'eni Yotzi B'Karban Aviv. It's this third time that it says that Karbonai extra is telling you that even if his father left over money for a Karban Chatas, he can't even use that money. And the other times that it says karbani, that you learn out already karban mamish, so you don't need to learn out karban mamish. You already know from the other times it says karbani. So obviously this is coming to tell you that even money the father left on with karban chatas, the son cannot use that for his own karban chatas.